Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. This is the Making Your Mark podcast. I'm your host, Mark Bundang, and this podcast is really about exploring some of the incredible journeys and incredible people that I've met over my career and over my life. Some new to me, some long running, but all in all, always something very valuable that I think people need to know. A little bit about my connection with my guest today, which is MJ Plebon. Thank you very much, MJ, for joining. A little bit of an intro. I met MJ this year through another mutual connection out of a business need, actually, from a company that I work for. And he just happened to have the services that we were interested in. We met for the first time, talked shop for a little bit, and then we connected. And I was really fascinated with your personal story, MJ. Would you be able to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where you come from and where you are now?
Yeah. Yeah, I was born and raised in rural Ontario, central Ontario, about 45 minutes from Algonquin Park. For those who do camping or into camping, they know where Algonquin Park is. I come from a small town of 1,200 people, thriving metropolis of Barry's Bay, Ontario. Its claim to fame, it's the last beer store, liquor store, Tim Hortons, before you get into the park. So it's a hustling place in the summertime. And so that's where I was born and raised. And I went to school at, it was called Ryerson Polytechnic at the time. And I studied chemical engineering technology. And after 4 years of that, I realized that that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And started working for a manufacturer in the UK that just started their operations here in Canada. So it was kind of working for a startup, but they had lots of money. So it was a sweet learning experience. And I spent 15 years with them. Started on the customer service desk, and then within 10 years, I became president and general manager of the Canadian division, and kicked that around and played around. I had some wonderful time there, and then got bored and went to work. I left that company and started working for a startup here in Montreal that had a technology to recover oil from water. A brand new technology. So we worked on commercializing that technology, and we became wildly successful. And then after 8 years, I decided to go on my own. I had enough of corporate life, and I figured I could maybe make my own business. And I started actually coaching people to make presentations, because that's what I had done my whole career. And I noticed when you're in that environment and you're making presentations to promote a product or to do training, and you look at other people trying to do the same thing, there's a need for coaching, and especially in putting presentations together, and PowerPoint decks and all that wonderful stuff. So that's what I started off doing. But I accidentally fell into doing YouTube videos, and so I did that, and got into the social media. It was just starting off between 2000 to I guess 2004 on. YouTube was around, and then I got into Facebook, and eventually started teaching social media and search engine optimization and digital marketing at Concordia University. So I've been doing that part-time and running my digital marketing agency, and here we are. This is a roundabout way of getting into the business.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, just hearing it again, I think the saying is true. A career is never really a straight line. You know.
No, no, I do admire people that, and you do meet them, and these people are really doctors, for example. They grew up, as they were growing up, they wanted to be a doctor. I went to school with a friend, and she wanted to be a doctor, and she did. She became a doctor. She just retired this year. So to hold that passion for that length of time, I have a lot of admiration for that. For me, I don't know if I suffer from ADHD, I just can't stay on something for very long. I got to migrate into different avenues. The cool thing about what I'm doing right now is that it's changing so fast. I scramble to keep up with all the advances that is going on right now. So it's always new. Every day's new. And that's probably what keeps me enthusiastic about what I do.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And you know what? I may touch back on that, but I do want to I do want to get on to some of the meat of the podcast a little bit, because I know there's so much in there that you shared with me
Hmm.
that I'd like to dive into. But when we started preparing for this, usually there's one of two things. One, people an experience that they want to share, and then the lesson comes from it afterwards. But I think for you, when we were preparing this together, or at least when we were talking about it together, you had a message you wanted to give, and then the experiences kind of lined up after that. If you can, why don't we get started with leading into that message that you wanted to give to for everyone?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
We have this. We tend to be always pursuing happiness, the pursuit of happiness. And what I found out from my life so far, it's more the happiness of the pursuit. Like I said, when I started working with my first corporate company, and I spent 15 years with them, the fun was making it and crawling, or was crawling up the corporate ladder to president and general manager position. Once you got there, it wasn't that much fun anymore. And that's why I didn't last my whole career there, because I found it just, the fun was gone. There was no chance to be creative like you used to be able to do as you're climbing the ladder and coming up with new ideas. So I think a lot of us are trying to pursue happiness, but I think what we need to do is look at the happiness of the pursuit and where it takes you and reflect on that. And there are two things that I find that have really made me happy in my life. And one is being of service, and the other one is creativity and exploring that in different avenues. And those two things, I find people are extremely happy when they are creating something and or when they are being of service. So if you can create something and be of service to somebody, it's it's 2x the happiness. And it really does bring people a lot of satisfaction, and I think that's a lot of that's missing. There's some of that's missing in today's society. So that's sort of what I wanted to share.
Okay, great, great. And maybe we can dive a little bit more into one of those two aspects. So you mentioned something about service, you mentioned something about creative. Now, not everyone, uh, if you were to ask 100 people, like, are you creative, or do you find any joy in create? I don't know if 100 people would say
Ah,
I'm
yeah.
creative. They don't believe it. But what do you have to say about that?
I would ask those 100 people, I would structure the question a little bit differently. I would ask them, think back when you were 4 years old, or as early as you can in your childhood. Think about what you did. Were you creative then? Did you like to draw? Did you like to color? Did you play an instrument? Did you like to dream? Did you like to create your own make believe world? As children, we were so creative. Especially when I was a kid and growing up in the 60s, we had one TV channel. We had two, actually, one in French, one in English. And so TV was a big part, but it wasn't everything. And I lived in the country, so you had to be creative or you got terribly bored to death. So I was into a lot of coloring. I was into writing a little bit. In my early grade school years, whatever, I liked writing, wrote poetry. Haven't done it since. Did a lot of coloring and drawing and painting, that kind of stuff. And I did a lot of creating in the mind, creating my own little worlds. And I'll tell you, one thing that I was really big on when I was about 4, 5, 6 years old, I knew what I wanted to do in my life at that time. At least that's what I thought. And I had three older sisters going to school. I wanted to go to developing countries and help people, help them have a better life. That was my dream. And I had this red box. It was a Christmas gift to somebody. And I had taken the empty box and it had this beautiful red shiny lid, and I hid this box in my toy box. and I would go and steal my sister's loose leaf paper, pencils, pens, and I would store this in my toy box. And I was going to take this one day and go to a developing country and help a whole bunch of people learn something. Right? That was my dream. Until so I was a thief when I was a kid. My career as a thief actually ended quite abruptly when I stole my sister's. This is a slide rule for anybody who grew up before calculators. We used the slide rules, and this was my middle sister. This was Linda's slide rule. I stole it, and my mom found out that I stole it. She went and actually did some cleaning in my toy box. So I got severely reprimanded for. Then she found out all the loose leaf paper and the pencils and the erasers and everything else I was hoarding in the bottom of my toy box. So that dream kind of dissipated really quickly, thanks to my mom and her disciplinary methods at the time. But I was always creating, and I was happy. Yeah, it was a magical time at that time. But then as you go through school, things change. You stop creating um, until actually I got into high school. The curriculum, we had to get 2 full credits in art. Now, at my high school, we had 2 options: art class to draw. And you think I would have migrated there with, drawing and painting as a child. No, my friends and I decided we were going to take music. So we all picked an instrument, and there was about 5 of us. And we said, we're going to take it until we get our 2 credits, and then we're going to drop it, because we had no interest in. Well, we stuck it out for the full 5 years. It was the best time of our high school life. Like, I played basketball, I played sports, I was involved in student council and a number of other different things. But band was it. It was because you got a chance to, again, create music. You saw the sheet music, but you had a chance to come together and create something more than just the notes on the page. And it was so that theme kind of continued even through that point. So creativity, I find even now with my students, when I get them to start creating something, even though there's digital marketing, they really, you see the light go on in their eyes, and how proud they are if they do a video for the first time and they come and they show it to the class. Look what I did. And it's amazing work. Absolutely phenomenal.
So this is something very interesting, because you talk about the joy, right, of that creativity gives to you, who is the creator, and you
Right.
don't necessarily have an end to it, but sometimes you do. Like, you talk about how you wanted to go out there and do something for like
Yeah.
charity work, right? So, but I guess my next question for you. I mean, how does creativity parlay into, say, something you would do in your career or something like that? How does that add value?
Well, I think what I've done, or what people can do, is try to use their creativity to do things different. Even the standard things that people normally do, the standard routine of working in a corporate life or running a business, whatever. When you are creative, you stand out. When you stand out, people take notice. I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager, and this is leads into the whole part of being a service. I worked at a auto mechanic garage. We had gas pumps, so I was sitting there pumping gas all the time. There were only 3 gas stations in this small little town. We were always the highest priced gasoline outlet. But when somebody came in and I went to service them, and they asked to fill up the tank, I washed their windows, all of their windows. I checked their oil. I checked the fan belts. I checked all these things. I had a whole list of things that I would do, so that when they finally had a full tank of gas, I would say, listen, you have a crack on your fan belt. Your air filter's fine. I washed your windshield and all that. We had a lineup of cars coming to our gas station, even though we charged more than anybody else, because of the service. It was just something to be creative. And when you did that, like, I had people, tell me, I had this elderly couple. They were traveling across Canada. So I did this whole routine for them. They were filling up. They're in like a Winnebago. So I filled up and did the whole engine check and all that for them. And they said, we've been across Canada and we've never had service like this. And they were so happy and so pleased. And I said, okay, that's unique. That's fun. So just trying to find something, do things differently. I think a lot of people can, you stand out. And if you're in a corporate environment, you become a number. If you run your own business, you're just another person running. You probably have lots of competition, regardless of what the business is. You got to do things to stand out, and that's where you combine your creativity to stand out and get people to notice you and appreciate that.
If I may ask, MJ, like some people are just naturally inclined to be creative, right? They look at some things and they can MacGyver the situation into like they see a rubber band and a toothbrush and they know they make something,
Yes.
radio. But MacGyver is also telling you a little bit of how old I am.
Love that show. Yes.
For you, I mean, how do you suggest people become, if they're not naturally inclined to be creative, how do you get,
Become curious and stay curious. Ask questions, and ask the why question. Why is this happening this way? Why do we do things this way? Why, can we do things a different way? And to stay curious and try to learn and try to get the understanding of why things are being done, well then possibly, and even with your discussions with other colleagues, with clients, with customers, to ask a lot of questions and try to understand what's happening with them. What are they thinking about? Because often what we do, what is the standard practice, doesn't necessarily serve our customers the best. I have a number one rule of marketing that I teach at Concordia. It's funny, I used to give an exam. This was worth 10% of their total mark if they got it word for word. And there's my number one rule of marketing is nobody gives a rat's ass about you. You really need to understand your customer and find out what makes them tick, what keeps them awake at night. What pain are they going through? What frustrations? What are their goals, their dreams, their objectives? And then once you find that out, do you have something to help them to get from point A to point B, or just make them progress forward a couple of steps? And so you have to be curious. You have to ask questions. I have my best teacher as far as being curious is my wife. She is continuously asking me questions. She questions everything. It drives my three daughters and I sometimes crazy because she just is relentless. But I understand her train of thought. I understand her purpose. And I try to take that teaching that she provides us, firsthand teaching, and I try to do it with my clients, with my students, try to understand what really makes them tick and what's happening in their life. And ask the question, stop and listen. Listening is such a great skill to develop. And it's a hard one to develop too, because we keep on thinking of what we're going to say next, right?
Oh, that is so true because most people they're not listening. They're waiting for the other person to stop talking so that they can start talking. It's
And I think, and it's funny when you have a conversation with somebody and they're telling you something and they finish, you pause and ask them another question, or if there's something you didn't understand, you mentioned this. Can you explain this a little bit more? Because I don't quite get it. And you do that a few times and they walk away. And here's their impression of you. They go, oh, Mark, what a wonderful person. Great conversationalist, whatever. But no, you just gave that person the opportunity to express themselves, go into great detail. I just kept being curious, asking questions. Well, you did this. How did that make you feel? And would you do it again? And this is why podcasts, I think, have taken off over the last few years as well, because, on social media, on general media, there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of negativity. And I think podcast is an opportunity for people to tell their story. And we all have a great story to tell. And I don't care who it is or how young you are. We all have wonderful stories, and they're good stories. We just have to learn how to craft it so that we can tell that good story.
That is so true because you talk about being unique, being able to stand out, differentiate yourself. There's a million and one podcasts out there. There's a million and one people who write. There's a million and one people who are an expert in your field who might be better than you or might be
Yeah,
not better than you, right? But what makes you different now? One of the few tools that we have left to differentiate ourselves is our personal story.
exactly.
It's really like the only thing that's really unique to you. How do you parlay that into, say, maybe your teaching?
Gosh, you should just talk to one of my students right now. And I warn them at the very first of every semester. I say, well, first of all, they're kind of shocked. They're taking social media, and here they are. They've got a boomer on the other side of the screen with white hair. And I laugh. And I don't turn my camera on until they're all in. And then I turn it on and I start laughing. I'm going, yeah, I know what you're thinking. What's a boomer going to tell you about TikTok, right? Like, come on, really. I what I do, and I warn them. I say, listen, you're going to ask me a question. I'm going to tell you a lot of stories. I said, I'm going to go off on a tangent. Some of my classes, they're 3-hour classes. I think I've gone 4 hours. And I've told them after 3 hours, I said, listen, we're still going. If you have something to do, you can leave. It's recorded. You can watch later. But I've gone up to 4 hours of just giving anecdotes and telling personal stories or stories of other people that I know of and what they've gone through. Because I think that shares a lot of experience, which they appreciate. And when you're dealing with 25 students that come from so many diverse backgrounds, I have a lot of international students, students from all different types of background, and you know you got to you got to be able to mix up the different types of stories in your teaching, because teaching can be very mundane and boring. So you mix it up, and the stories you could always, and actually in my social media class I have one full session on storytelling, because I tell them, I said, listen, you need to learn to tell your story, and this is the various ways you can craft a story, and here are the tools that you can use. And they look at me and they go, but this is not really social media. And I go, it's all social media. Look at the people that you may admire. They're telling their story, and you're following them because you're intrigued by their story, or you see yourself in their story. And like I tell, one of the things that I say to them, I said, if you can tell a story and make your audience the main character of your story, they're going to listen from the very beginning to the very end, regardless of how long it is. And think about it. If you pick up a book, you start reading it, and you find it's a good book, it's because there's something in that book that's resonating with you. And you're seeing yourself somewhere as the hero, the villain, or supporting role, whatever. And so you're enthralled in this whole thing. That's what makes a good story. That's why it makes a great movies, because we see ourselves, we identify with one of the characters, and or the situation, whatever the case may be.
Oh, so you mentioned that you give this in a class, and then you kind of teach them how to tell a story. It's interesting because the class in and of itself, you've incorporated some creativity in there. You've incorporated listening. You've incorporated storytelling, and that's of great value to the people who take your classes. If I could use another word for it, it's you're providing a service to others.
Very
Do
much so.
you have any more elaboration on service to others that you want to share
Yeah,
with us?
yeah. In my first corporate career of 15 years, one of the things that they were very good at as an organization, this was part of their culture, was training. So I got involved with uh, providing seminars. And these would be to mechanical engineers, they would be to tradespeople on a certain area of the mechanical um, heating and ventilation system. So we were doing seminars at the time, at least once a week. And so you were, and the whole, and I enjoyed it so much because I put a lot of effort into preparing it so that it was dry and mundane. We're talking about valves and pumps, like how exciting can that really be? So you would have to be creative to make it exciting. And so you would work on this. And the sheer enjoyment that you would get in return, and it's totally selfish. Like, they learned a lot, but they would come to you and be so grateful for your training. And you went home feeling like $1,000,000 and go, my company's paying me to do this, but I would do it for nothing, because the feeling was so wonderful, the feedback. And it wasn't always that way. There were times where I crashed and burned, and I had people sitting there, tapping their pen on, is it time to go yet? That kind of stuff. And you understood that, and you worked harder to overcome and make it better. So it was a continual process. You don't just magically start teaching and being of service and you become really good at it. You have to really work hard. And so teaching at Concordia helped out an awful lot. And I got a story to tell you. My first summer class, I was teaching. It was social media, and this was before COVID, so all my classes were in person. I had this lady come into my class, Carmen, and Carmen was older than me, and she's taking social media. So I was so curious as far as why she was taking social media. So at the end of the class, I said, Carmen, can I just talk to you for a second? Just stay after class for a few minutes. And she came up to me. She says, what's up? I said, I'm so curious. I said, why are you taking social media? I said, I think you're about my age. And I'm just curious, why? I said, what do you do for a living? And she says, I travel the world for free and I build websites. And I look down and go, what? How do you do that? So she told me about an organization that's actually funded by Global Affairs Canada. The organization is called Catalyst Plus. And it's a group of retired or semi-retired executives that have a number of different skills in leadership, project management, marketing, sales, whatever. And she's telling me about this organization, and she looks at me and she pauses and she says, you should apply, because they need people in marketing just like you, especially digital marketing. I went and checked out the website that night. I applied that night. I went through 3 rounds of interviews, a criminal check. That was probably the scariest thing, whether I passed that one or not. And I got accepted. And then COVID hit. So I did maybe 3 mandates virtually with Indigenous communities across Canada. And that was very rewarding. And then COVID ended, and they go to me, they called me up and they said, we have an in-country mandate in Kenya. They said, do you want to go? And I said, when can I go? And so off to Kenya I go. And it was a 3-week mandate. So I got to tell you this, because it sort of comes back to the whole creativity part. I'm in Kenya. I'm teaching this group to build their new website. So I'm working with them, and it was a great organization. It was government funded. They gave loans and grants to young people 18 to 30 who wanted to start their own business in Kenya. So I'm working with them to help get their site more user-friendly and all that kind of stuff. So Monday to Friday, I'm busy as can be. I'm still teaching virtually at Concordia while I'm in Nairobi. So Tuesday from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm teaching a class. I go to the session Tuesday evening from 9 to midnight, I teach my second class. Anyway, I did that for the first week. Friday, I'm zonked, right? So Friday evening, I didn't even go for dinner. I went to bed. I wake up Saturday, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm in my room, and I sit there, and all of a sudden I start to cry uncontrollably. And it was that 4-year-old kid who used to steal his sister's papers and pencils, whatever, because his dream was to go to a developing country and help people. And it was that 4-year-old saying, you clown. It took you this long to finally get here, but he says, you made it. This is what you always wanted to do. And I'm still getting goosebumps when I think of that whole episode. And that's why, I've continued to do that. The organization's been wonderful. If I won a lottery today, I would give all my money to my wife and my daughters and say, knock yourself out. I would do this full time. Because when you go, they are so grateful to learn. They are so appreciative. And I had my godson came over. He's an electrician. He came over to help me out with some electrical stuff. I was driving him back to his dad's place, and he said to me, he said, "If you won all the money in the world, what would you do?" And I told him, I said, "I know exactly what I would do. I would just volunteer like this." Because I said, and it's purely selfish because I get more out of it than I think they get as far as me sharing my expertise. It is, you come back and for weeks on end, you're on a high. It's all you can think about is them and what they're doing, and you stay in touch, and but now with the internet the way it is, it's so easy to maintain that friendship. So I'm traveling the world and making friends all over the place, and so I'm off to Peru in about 3 weeks from now, and looking forward to that. So it's interesting, but yeah, my creative dream back when I was 4, 5, 6 years old actually has come true, and
Yeah, full circle. My
full
God.
circle. Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't a perfect circle, that's for sure.
Imagine doing that. And
Oh yeah, lots of ups and downs and dives and weaving and everything else, but that adds to your experience and it adds to your capabilities and what you can share as a person to other people. I've been very fortunate and very grateful. I've seen, in my corporate career, I've done so many different things, and that could be a podcast for another time.
you know what? I know there's a million things that I want to ask, but I know that we've aimed for a certain target on this one.
Sure,
So that means that I'm going to have to ask you for part two sometime down the line,
no
if you're
problem.
open to.
My pleasure.
Um, thank you, MJ. So one of the things we like to do on this podcast is, we've got hopefully an audience that will
Yeah.
grow, and it's a young or sometimes more mature audience as well, for a professional or aspiring professional. Is there any particular advice that, coming from the experiences that you've kind of shared today, that you'd like to impart on this audience?
It's the happiness of the pursuit. Is I think we search for, we pursue pleasure, but that's only short term. So we try pursuing happiness, but really the happiness is it's in the whole pursuit. It's the journey. It's not necessarily the destination. I look at my career and where I am in this life, and people ask me because I should retire. I don't want to, and I say I'm not retiring
Yeah.
until I hope I go in the middle of doing something. That's the way I want to, because it's just there's too much to do. There's too much to see. There's too many people to meet. There's too many problems to solve, and you can't do it yourself. But it's a great world. Yeah, it's a crazy world. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but there's a lot of good stuff out there too. So you just have to go and search for it.
MJ, how, if people after watching this podcast want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you? What's the best way?
LinkedIn is probably my go-to social media platform. So it's MJ Plebon, J.Plebon. I think you could also, I think it's Montreal Marketing. I might also be under that handle as well. Just search me out. Look for the guy with white hair. That's me. And and reach out and connect, and I'd be more than happy to. If you have questions about, especially when it comes to digital marketing and stuff like that, if I specialize in B2B, that's because that's my background, and so it's be more than happy to have a chat. They can schedule a 20-minute conversation, although that won't be long enough.
I know. It's like Gilligan's Island. It was supposed to be a 3-hour tour. Turns out
That's
to be
that's
years. But it's
right.
well worth it, though. It's well worth it, MJ, I
Thank
must
you,
say.
Mark. All right.
Interaction we've had, it's such an utter joy. I always come back. Sometimes I tell my wife when I come back from talking to you, I'm like, hey, this guy MJ, you know what he said? I look forward to the next one, and I've got you on camera saying you're committing to a second part, so I will hold you to that.
My pleasure. No, listen, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. It's always wonderful speaking with you, Mark, and just giving me the opportunity to tell a little bit of my story.
Perfect. Great.
Okay.
And on that note, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Hey, thank you very much. If you made it this far to the end of the podcast, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You know, we're just starting out, so it would help if I could just ask one more thing of you. Please subscribe to this channel and share the podcast, share the episode on any platform you can. It would mean a lot to me and it would help us a lot. Thank you.